Hello everyone and welcome to a special edition of Dub at the Cup. We come to you live from Marvel Stadium not long after full time as the Matildas have defeated France 1-0 in their final send-off game ahead of the World Cup next week. Alongside me I have Davutovic and Pokuah Frimpong joining me to talk about this game. I'll start with you, Pokuah. Thoughts, observations, what did you make of that one?
A really impressive win in terms of just getting some momentum before the big game against Ireland. I thought the changes that we made, they were surprising at the start, but they all turned out really well, and Mary Fowler doing Mary Fowler things.
She does as she does. And Dave, any initial thoughts from the result tonight?
Overall positive. These games, the last game before a big tournament, a World Cup, it's not so much about the result, it's more about those individual performances, the players who are, fighting fitness, getting through the team cohesion, just those little positive signs going into a tournament. So from that point of view, hugely positive for the Matildas. The only question mark were a couple of those injury concerns, which we can touch on later. But yeah, Mary Fowler scoring the goal, I don't think they could have scripted it any better.
We'll come back to injuries in just a moment, but starting 11 for tonight. Dave, again to you, do you think we saw as close to the Matildas starting 11 for the game against Ireland next week, or do you think we'll see some changes ahead of that game?
If you asked me that at the 70th minute, I would have said yes, that is the starting 11, but I think, again, we don't want to go too hard on the injuries. We'll touch on that in a moment, but Alana Kennedy did come off with what appeared to be cramp, although Tony Gustafsson, we just heard in the press conference, she did go into the game with a little bit of a niggle, and he almost had a grimace on his face when he was talking about it. So look, considering they're hoping to play 7 games in this tournament, they're talking about, the long game, the next 5 weeks. I think they'll wrap Alana Kennedy in cotton wool, assuming she's good to go. And I reckon we'll see Claire Polkinghorne come back into the starting lineup to pair up with Claire Hunt. They've obviously played most of the games together over in 2023. But beyond that, I think Mary Fowler's given Tony Gustafsson a real positive selection headache, but again, looking at the tournament as a whole, I think they start her on the bench and bring her off against Ireland.
Well, speaking of Tony Gustafsson, he speaks so much about his starting 11 and his finishing 11. And Pokuah, for you tonight, those subs that they made at halftime, bringing Mary Fowler on, and we saw a slight positional shift as well. Hayley Russo coming into the central position and Kyra Cooney-Cross pushing out wide. How do you think those changes worked, the impact that it made, and how important, particularly for Mary, were those minutes in that half?
I think for Mary Fowler, playing in the number 9 role, I think is something that's important that she gets more minutes at that if we're going to continue playing her in that position. I think she naturally is more suited to the midfield, but playing her up front, and if we're going to see her against tougher opponents, you want to get that experience for her early on. And for Russo in the middle, it wasn't something that you're typically familiar with her game style. She does, suit that role of a winger so well. But I thought those changes were important, that we see variety, because bringing on likes of Emily Van Egmond on in replacement of Caitlin Ford and Sam Kerr and things like that. We want to see how those things adapt, and I think they worked out well tonight.
We do have to talk about the injuries, because it's always that time coming into a World Cup where you don't want to see players going down. You need to manage load, you need to manage travel. Some of the girls from Scandinavia came in just a couple of days ago, so they didn't play a role, or a very limited role tonight. But we saw Tamika Yallop go down with what looked like a knee hyperextension, perhaps a little bit of a cork as well. Alana Kennedy go off late in the game. How worried are you about these injuries?
Well, I think they're hugely concerning, considering we're only a week away from the World Cup starting, and obviously any changes need to be made 24 hours before the opening game. So literally 8 p.m. Wednesday night Eastern time. So they've got some big calls to make. As you mentioned, Yallop was the big concern. It was a hyperextension. Gustafsson did reveal that she wanted to play on, but he said to her, look, come off. We've got to play the long game here. So obviously common sense prevailed, and Ivy Lewick came on for the closing moments. So she'll obviously be monitored. I presume she'll have scans tomorrow over the next 48 hours. Alana Kennedy, we mentioned, another one who they'll monitor. The fact that she did have a niggle going into it is the other concern, but I think you almost have to take a punt with Alana, assuming it's not too serious. And the other one, it's worth referencing, but Sam Kerr, she had an ice pack on the bench late in the game. I don't think there's too much to worry about, but again, Tony Gustafsson did reveal in the press conference that they were managing her going into the tournament. But look, Sam Kerr will clearly start next week, and I think she'll play a little bit longer than what she did tonight.
And we hope that all of those injuries are much better than we the worst possible case scenario. But in the case that one of these players has to drop out, if Tamika Yallop's knee is no good, Pokuah, we know that there were some girls who in a train-on capacity, there were some girls who didn't make that final cut of 23. If someone does come in for a player like Tamika Yallop, who would you expect to see move into that role?
So interesting. I think for me personally, I'd love to see the likes of Holly McNamara. Obviously, she wasn't in that provisional squad, but I think she brings so much versatility going forward and brings something a little bit different that some of our other wingers don't have. So I think someone like her coming in would be good for the squad. 2
points to make on the injuries. The other one, Kaya Simon, who was obviously the surprise in terms of being picked in the original 23-player squad, considering she only had her knee reconstruction 9 months ago. She was the only player that didn't warm up tonight, which I thought was interesting. And Gustafsson, when he did reveal the initial squad, made the point that he does have up until 24 hours before the opening game to make a change. So that's another one to monitor over the next week. He did reveal that they have been training really hard. They've been trying to load them up, especially considering some of the players, to your point, Grace, haven't had a lot of minutes under their belt. So that's another one to watch. And just in terms of the selections, there were 50 players selected in the initial squad, which wasn't publicly revealed, but we are led to believe that they can pick any one of those 50 to replace an injured player should they need to make the change.
And a little point of contention, as this game here at Marvel Stadium tonight was wrapping up, we started to hear word of a game behind closed doors between Republic of Ireland and Colombia, which concerningly and apparently was called off after 20 minutes due to the physicality and the nature of the game. I mean, that's crazy to comprehend. 20 minutes and a game was deemed too dangerous to proceed. What do you make of that?
I would like to see maybe some video, if somebody's got some video evidence. I've got some thoughts, and maybe Conor McGregor came down or something like that, but I don't think that was the case. So I'm assuming it has to be something incredibly serious for it to stop after 20 minutes. But I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing for the Matildas heading into that Ireland game, if they're a little bit underprepared, but we obviously wouldn't want that heading into the tournament.
Safety first and foremost, yeah. We hope all the players are okay, but dead set from a Matildas point of view, I mean, you'd be wrapped, game called off, injuries, that's not the preparation that Ireland or Colombia, for that matter, want going into their first game. So the signs are really looking good for the Matildas ahead of the opener on Thursday night.
Yeah, excellent. And in terms of tonight's performance, 1-0 against France. France were the last top 10 nation that the Matildas hadn't played over Tony Gustafsson's reign, so obviously a very strategic move to tick off all of these teams over time. The last team, the last piece of that puzzle, you could say, ahead of World Cup preparation. They've now played every top 10 nation. What do you make of the Tony Gustafsson reign, the era, the managerial career as we go into the World Cup? We've done all of the friendlies, we've done all of the preparation. A general consensus of where we are today.
It finished off a lot better than what it started. I think we all agree with that. And to be honest, again, in the press conference, he did actually make a real point of when he was given the floor at the start, he said, this isn't just about tonight. This is about the whole 2-year process of getting to that point, and, admitted that there were, trials and tribulations and real challenges throughout. So he was really thrilled with tonight being the end point, the high water mark going into the World Cup. You mentioned earlier about the goal. I mean, 2-3 minutes after Sam Kerr and Caitlin Ford come off, we score. And that was, such a talking point throughout that whole campaign, that there was such a heavy reliance on, particularly Sam. So, the fact that Cooney Cross, Razzo and then Mary Fowler combined for that goal, I think really sums up where we're at. And also Claire Hunt, I mean, the 54th and final player tried by Gustafsson throughout this process. And I mean, I'll tell you what, if anyone else has played a better first 6 games for the Matildas, certainly in recent times, I'd love to hear, because she's been immense. She was a little bit shaky in that first half, but again, considering she's played 6 games, she dusted herself off, got on with it, she's good to go.
Fair to say it has been a meteoric rise for Claire Hunt. Dave, Pokuah, thank you so much for your time tonight.